Bridgit Norris, leadership consciousness, conscious. Why does it need disruption? I love talking about business. She's a leadership coach. We talk a lot about leadership, about how what we're doing now with all the virtual work and how leadership has changed, perhaps for the better, perhaps for the worse, hard to tell. I always like to talk about the difference between leadership and management. I've had managers before in my business who thought they were leaders and they were not. And I think it's a clear distinction. But she's created this online community called The Revolt, and she helps people be better leaders. She works with many in her community, a lot of lawyers, a lot of business owners. She initially had a mission to help 10,000 women, but with her background in construction and having a husband and a son, she eventually found that working with men oftentimes are a little less difficult. So it's about 50-50 now. We talk about the difference there. She's got these 5 kind of leadership lessons that she posts on her Instagram that we review. One is dealing with values. I'll tease the others, but it's a great conversation. I enjoy talking about business. I've had my business for over 30 years, and I continue to learn. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Be yourself, Bridgit Norris. I'm so excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. So, why does leadership conscious need disruption?
Oh, Lord, we're coming right out of the chute with those questions. I think the new wave of, and I don't want to even say that this, everybody likes to talk about how they think COVID, brought on new changes of new things, and it did. But I think this has been something that needed to happen for a long time because the online space has created a version of leadership that is, let's see, what words, nice words can I use? It is lacking. It is, it's smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of invalidity to who people really are. And so the disruption in that is a necessity to get back to being real and being truthful and really being out there to help people. So that is really what the portion of disruption means to me.
And is it because there's the Great Resignation, there was people leaving, so people got promoted who didn't maybe wasn't they shouldn't have been, and so they're kind of put in a position they're not there? Or is it just not being face to face, or perhaps a combination?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a combination of that. I think that there's a lot of, and it's the craziness of seeing, and I hate to say this, but I mean, because my son is going to be 24 next month, and I constantly tell him, I'm like, what is wrong with, your generation? Like, you don't want to work, you want to do things super easy. I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, that's not how, we were raised. We were raised that, hustle's not a bad word. We're supposed to be doing that. But now if you look at it, it's like, you're not supposed to hustle. That's like a swear word in the online space. And I think moving so many people into the space of virtual has kind of, making it worse. It's like here, taking somebody who was never virtual and now we're throwing you in this and you're realizing, oh my God, they're taking on all the traits that we're trying to like not have be a thing.
Hmm. And the difference between leadership and management.
Oh boy. So there's a lot to be said in that, because a leader, you can't be somebody can't anoint you to be a leader. People have to want to follow you, and there's a difference in showing up and barking orders at people and managing them, and then going out and doing what they're told, but never going further than that because they're not willing to follow you, because you're not leading them, you're managing them. So actually had this conversation with somebody. It went horribly, somebody in my organization, and it didn't come across well, but I don't think people understand the difference. They think that they know what they're doing. I've been doing this for years. This is how I lead people. And I'm like, well, let's take a look at what that looks like, in your division, because it's lacking. So I think there's a big difference in them. I think that people understanding, people have to want to follow you. People have to want to wake up and work with you and work for you and feel like they're valued and they're heard and they're understood. And if you're missing all of those components, you're just managing.
Yeah, I've had managers before that really thought they were leaders, and you have to kind of have a talk with them. I agree with what you said. Managers kind of look at the day to day. There's goals that we need to hit. There's we've got to meet certain targets. Here's how we're going to get there. Whereas leaders are more looking into the future and what we can do, kind of big picture, and it's just kind of a very different mindset.
Yeah, it's the understanding of managing, taking all of those things. The leaders, we need to bring people along with us. We need to have those people willing to do the things that we're seeing as a visionary, and the things that we want to do, and the things that we can see that they can do that maybe they can't see that for themselves. And if you're not doing that, I think it's a disservice to the person themselves to have them grow. And obviously it's a disservice to your company or your firm.
It certainly is. And then you get into, then there's some managers that just micromanage. And it's interesting with with the virtual. I mean, it's tough to micromanage virtually, isn't it? What happens there?
Oh no, it's easy for people that know that. Believe me, it was, I started coaching in a company, and it was the literal first thing I said before I took the coaching job. And I said, I don't do well with the micromanaging. I don't like that concept. I won't manage and lead other people that way. So if this is something that's a part of your culture, we're not going to be a fit. And that goes from time, that goes from, the projects that you're doing, right down to everything. And I've seen it, and I'm seeing it where, every little thing you have to have your finger on it. And it's not, it's not healthy. And it doesn't allow for growth. I think it really stunts the ability of someone to trust that they are capable of doing the work that you're giving them.
You've got a very interesting. So you worked in the construction industry, male dominated, very, very male. I guess that's what I'll say. And then, and that had its own challenges. But then at a certain point, your husband took a job. You had to quit your job. You started watching your son, and then that came to a point where he didn't want you to watch him as close enough, and you had to make some pivots there.
Yeah, I always laugh when I say that, and I feel like it, I was blessed. Before I met my husband, I was a single mom, and there is no such thing as not doing all the things by yourself. And then you're given this opportunity where I was like, I get to be, I get to be a mom. This is great. I never expected that in my life. And then you feel like you just wake up one day and that happens, but literally that was like 12 years later. But you feel like you just woke up, and it was like a smack in the face. It was like constantly I tell, my friends who have little ones, think about it now. Do not wait until, they're like, I don't need you to sit around me anymore, and then decide what you want to pivot into, because you end up doing the really long version that I did.
Wow. And then, my goodness. And so then you start doing some network marketing, and you start, you don't like it, and you have a sit down with your husband. What do you like? And here we are.
Yeah, that is the long version. It was what is everybody else doing? Let me try that. And I was horrible at it. I'm a person who's like, I want to help everybody do everything. And it's what's the best for you, not like what I'm selling right now. So that never worked for me. It was horrible. And I picked things that I was not into. I was in construction. I don't know how to do makeup. So now I'm selling makeup. My husband's like, I don't exactly know what you're doing here. I'm like, I don't either, but let's just see. And finally it was like, this isn't working. I have to figure it out. And I shifted into a brick and mortar fitness business as well,
That's right,
which
for a year.
I love. That's been a big part of my life, but it became, everything. I didn't realize how consuming a brick and mortar actually is and how big of a team you need. And when you're on your own, and it became too much. And so that shifted into coaching, which I was blessed to have one of my clients actually say that to me. She said, "Oh, you're more like a life coach than my trainer." And I'm like, "What's a life coach? Is that a thing?" And so I'm immediately Googling, what's a life coach? How do we do this? And then that started that perpetual cycle of trying to figure out what that means. How do you life coach? What are you life coaching on? It's a long process if you're just trying to wing it. So I always tell people, like, let's not wing it. Let's really figure out what you love, what you're good at, what you want to do versus just trying to figure it out along the way. I mean, I don't regret it, but I could say I probably could have shortened the time frame a little bit.
Yeah. What's the old saying? Don't, try not to invest in restaurants and gyms. I mean, there's just so much work.
I know. And then of course, my husband would tell me, maybe you're not meant to make money. And I'm like, I took that literally. I'm like, what does that mean? You mean I'm not capable of doing something? And so then I pushed harder, and it was like, I missed the concept. Like, I'm not doing it to make the money. I'm doing it for me. I know it's my purpose to help people. How do I figure out how to make that work for me without it being such a struggle? And I'm hard-headed, and I push back and very stubborn. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do it exactly this way. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way. So I think that's good lessons to learn. But I think if somebody would have told me some of the things ahead of time, I would have been a little bit more prepared.
But you went full at it. You learned a lot of great things, and you got, you got some advice from your customers or your clients there, and you moved on. Now you've got this great community, the Revolt.
Yes, that has been the biggest, I think, the longest process to get here to the Revolt. But I think I had to go through my own personal revolt, and that's kind of how that evolved. I actually shut down my coaching business for almost 2 years, I would say a year and a half, because I really got lost in the online space. I got consumed by what I was supposed to do, who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to show up at. And that's not who I was. It's never who I was. When I was 12, I moved out of my house. I was very rebellious. Wow. I never let anybody dictate to me how I was supposed to be. And somehow I allowed that to happen to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I said I had to shut it down. I got off social media, and I just had to get away from it so that I could figure it out. And when I came through it, I realized how many other, at that time it was just women, how many other women were doing the same exact thing and showing up inauthentically and really hating what they were doing and feeling like they had to be someone they weren't. And I'm like, this is happening too much. It happened to me, and I'm not somebody who ever went through that in their entire life. And looking at somebody who didn't have that kind of childhood, I'm like, I can see how easy it is.
Yeah, your mission, Bridgit. I mean, I hate to say it used to be, but it was at one point helping 10,000 women. But you soon learned, through working in construction, for having a son, that men are almost easier sometimes to coach.
100%. I actually work again. I started helping coaching in a program for lawyers, and I actually found that. And I said this to one of my favorite ones that I coach, and he so easy. I said, I don't know why I haven't been doing this forever. You guys are so easy. Like, just this is what I need to do. This is what I'm going to do. I come back, I do it, and we figure out what worked and what didn't, and we keep moving. There is no emotion in it. There's nothing. And I'm like, and for me, I should have been doing that all along. I'm not, I laugh when I say this. And the first woman I coached ever, when she started crying, I was hysterical. I didn't know what to do. I had to turn the video off. I asked my husband, I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here. And he's like, you're supposed to be a human right now. And I'm like, I don't know. So for me, it was like the shift of why wasn't I doing this all along? It should have been. And people along the way kind of told me, you should, I don't understand why you're not coaching men. I'm like, oh, I don't really think I can help them. I don't know how I could help them. And my husband's like, well, you kind of coach me all the time when we're having conversations. It's no different. And it's still in my head. I could not process it. But all along, I mean, I was in construction. I was in a male industry working with only men. So yeah, I just kind of got smacked in the face with it and realized I should have been doing it all along.
And to this day, your mix, is it more men than women?
I think it's pretty even now. I think we have a little bit more of an even keel. And what I'm finding is if I'm sticking, the more you stick with, and this is the crazy part, but people that you're coaching that are along the same lines as your personality, very type A, high achieving, motivated people, the easier it is to be yourself and coach them in the way that they're supposed to be coached. Because I don't kit glove people. And so when I was coaching before and just taking on anybody, it was like I had to do the dance of, how am I supposed to talk to you? Is this going to be okay? Do I have to? And that's not who I am. So it was very difficult for me to figure that out. And now that you work with people of the same, personality, it's just so much, they expect it. If you do something else, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you letting me get by on this? Right? Like, why? You must have something going on today because you're letting me slip through this. So it's actually been such an evolution for me to understand. And that's the idea of the revolt, was really taking people back to understanding that about themselves. That is like, that's the superpower, not whatever magic you can, shift, for someone else. It's owning that part of it.
Yeah. And so it's more about their type A versus their gender.
100%, because for someone to tell me otherwise, when I worked in construction, like, you're not going to tell me that there isn't, I say this all the time, women, I run circles around men in construction. By the time I got through the years, totally possible depending on who you are and what you do. So sometimes I think it's definitely women do a little bit stronger than men in a lot of portions, but it is definitely that.
On your Instagram, Bridgit, you've got great content, but I really enjoyed kind of your five lessons as recently you posted. I'll start with the fifth one actually, is have conscious business in the way of the future.
Yeah. So conscious business, a lot of this to me became sort of an ethics issue with the coaching industry, especially coaching, evolving into an expanding way to make millions and forcing people to feel like they're not successful if you can't show, 100,000s in months. And it really became a problem for me because ethically, I think what people were doing and charging was wrong. And I think that a lot of people were hurt by it. I was in a group of people, men and women, that spent a lot of money and their lives were ruined financially. And it was very hard for me to watch. It was very hard for me to see. And that's kind of what shifted. I think that we're missing the concept of how we're here to help people. Everybody has a business, has to charge, and you make money how you make money. But I don't believe in doing it off the backs of people when you're actually not transforming their lives or helping them in the way that you're supposed to. So that's really how that started for me. And I think that that's the shift that we need to see in every industry, not just coaching.
And going back to our first point, Bridgit, about, virtual versus face-to-face, can companies run successfully virtually? What do they need to do?
Yes. And I think before I would say, I don't know on this, but the program that I coach in that's for lawyers, the creator of that program runs 5 virtual law firms. Wow. He does not have offices, and that's kind of how he's teaching people. You can do this virtually. Now there's a lot of things that happen in the meantime. Obviously, if you're a litigator, you have to go to court. There still is the ability to have to meet with people. So there's exceptions, but there's definitely ways to make it happen for everyone. And I think people are moving away from, look how many empty office buildings there are these days. People are like, I don't need that expense. I can pay people more, have them do their work virtually, and get a better product than having people show up and be miserable for driving to work for 2 hours a day.
Right. Yeah, I see very much the hybrid happening now. Okay, you got to come in twice a week or 3 times a week or 5 times a month or whatever it may be. And to kind of justify that space. But, I'm very fortunate. I started my business in the 90s, and I still have 2 employees that have been with me for over 20 years. Now, we were brick and mortar for a long time, and we moved to virtually about a year before COVID, actually. So I already know the expectations. We have tools involved, and it was pretty a smooth transition for us. But I could tell a new employee coming in and never meets their coworker. It's not worse or better. It's just different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concept of it's so unproductive sometimes. I'm of the
Mm,
firm belief that you have to have so many meetings because you are not physically in person. So I
right.
think that for me, there's a part of a productivity issue, and I actually am in the process of taking a certification for like flow. It's called flow certification, so that you can really increase your productivity, eliminate all of the other stuff. And I think it's needed now because we're wasting a lot of time. I see it. I'm like, why am I in a 1 hour meeting when we talked about nothing for an hour?
Ah,
Like, just so that we can say we're in a 1 hour meeting and we're looking at each other, it's pointless and it's not productive. So those are the things that I think that we can be definitely fixing in that aspect of the virtual space. Is just because we're not physically, seeing each other doesn't mean we need to have 10 meetings a day. And it's just, that's becoming consuming.
yeah. If being virtual can minimize those just kind of wasted long meetings where you have people just kind of beating their chests and just it's just so pointless. And we've got work to do, and that would be a great relief. Your number 4 in your top 5 lessons is having a method and doing it your way is not an option.
Yes.
Not an
So
option.
not an option. Too often, and I did this myself. I fell to the I don't have anything that I can give that's special, that's going to be magic, that's going to train, all the things that we see. So what do? We mimic, what's successful for someone else. And
Mm,
I can tell you from mimicking it multiple times in multiple ways, even getting certifications and trying to mimic, it never worked. It never
mm,
worked for me because it didn't come from me. It wasn't 100% true to me. And so I think that really to me means you may have learned a million things in your life. You may have gotten 6 degrees and 40 certifications in something, but there are only certain things about any of that are going to work for you. And so creating your own method, obviously 90% of the time we're not creating anything new, right? It's all
mm,
been done a million times, but taking the things that you've learned and the way you've learned them and creating a method, it is yours. Even
mm.
though, you might not have come up with the exact format of it, it's still yours if you do it your way. And it's not an option to do it someone else's way. And I think the more we can see that in every industry, I'm explaining that to lawyers. You went to law school, you all got the same law degree, you all passed the same bar exam, but none of you are doing the same thing. None of
Mm.
you are doing the same thing in the same way. And you have to own that, and you have to really see how you can utilize that to your benefit. Your experiences and your learning is totally different than mine. So if you are out there and you're trying to show up in a way that is someone else's, it's never going to work. You can
Mm.
try it. I mean, I give you give you the pass. Try it so that you can see how that it feels in that way when you show up and you're like, this is not how I would speak. This is not how I would teach. This is not how I would instruct somebody to do something. I'm just following. I liken it to, and I hate to say this, the our standard medical system where it's a flow chart. Like
Mm.
we can't pass go until we pass these 3 steps.
Mm.
And it's why medical in that format doesn't work for everyone. It's why people are seeking out, holistic medicine where people can not follow flow charts.
It's interesting as you describe mimic and what you describe now. I hear the phrase "fake it until you make it."
Oh, yeah. I used to love that saying. I used to be like,
Yeah.
oh, just do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it's the worst possible advice that you
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
And I think it's sometimes we think that if it's the confidence we need to show up and fake it, that you're like, I can be confident if I'm faking this because it's not mine, because it's scary if you show up in a way that it is yours, and then people don't like it, or, there's comments to it. And that part is scary. So I think in some ways it's easier to follow the fake it till you make it, because you're not actually being who you are, and you're not actually being true to yourself. So you can just kind of push that off on something else. So yeah, I don't do the fake it till you make it anymore.
No, I don't either. Yeah. And it's a bit of the imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand. You're faking it to be confident, but then you're feeling that imposter. It's like a vicious cycle. You're constantly on a hamster wheel of, I'm faking it, I'm confident. Oh gosh, this doesn't feel good, and you just keep going and going, and it's like, how do I get off? Get me off.
Your third lesson: you need a disruptor POV, point of view.
Yes. And I think that goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about. You have a disruptor point of view. Everyone does. It's just what I'm finding is a couple things. One, people think that what they want to say isn't a disruptor point of view. And then two, they're afraid to say it. And I've had multiple people have that. And I know that what's being said out in the space, in the world, I have a different point of view on it. And it's going to push buttons to people. And so that's a disruptor point of view. It doesn't have to, just the word disruption and disruptor scares a lot of people, especially women. They're like, I don't want to be a disruptor. And I'm like, but you already are. You already have thoughts and feelings, and you have things that you want to get out in the world that aren't going to be like everyone else. And they are going to disrupt some people. They're going to not like it. It's just human nature. And if you're not willing to put it out there, it's going to hold you back 100%. And I think that you're missing the point. You're missing the fact that there's a whole world of people that need to hear it. There's a whole world of people that are thinking the same thing and afraid to say it. So be the person that's willing to say it.
Yeah, when I think disruptor, I think out of the box. I think non-tradition. I think make your own pathway.
Yes. A lot of women, though, are like, disruptor. Well, I'm not really rebellious. I was never a rebellious kid. I don't really want to make waves. I was taught, just sit over in the corner and be quiet and you're good to go. And I'm like, but that's not how you feel, right? Like, you're screaming inside that you have things to say. And so you got to be willing to just scream it. Be willing to get uncomfortable and say it, because as soon as you do that, it didn't take long for a lot of my clients to start doing it and feel like, oh my God, I feel like the weight's off my shoulders. I just said some things and I feel better. I feel normal. I feel like I'm speaking the things I want to speak. And I'm like, it's just that easy. It's that easy, but it's that hard.
Your movement is the DNA of your business.
It is my business. It is the revolt, because I personally had to go through it myself. It is the exact thing that created my business. It's the exact thing that created the movement. It is an everyday reminder for me to never go back to the place that got me to have to create it in the first place. So I have to have that reminder constantly. It's easy to fall prey to consumption in the space, and, oh, that's shiny. Oh, that looks great. Like, what if I did that? That is it's so easy to fall into that. It's a constant reminder for me.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. And it's, it's just this constant theme of disruption that we keep talking about, Bridgit.
And it's kind of when I think back about it, and I think back about putting the words together, it's been my entire life. And so I pull people into that. I'm like, let's go back and look at what little pieces of you, I had said that to myself. The 12-year-old girl that said, I'm moving out. I mean, what 12-year-old goes to their mom and says, I'm moving out, and there's no conversation? There isn't any, because that's how I was. It's like, this is what I'm doing. There's nobody that's going to stop me. Whatever you say doesn't matter. The logic behind it's never going to matter. What do you tell somebody who thinks they know everything? I needed that person back. So when I ask somebody to go back and I say, what would this little girl say or do? And it's funny how you can find things in people. They're like, oh, wait a minute. I never really even thought about how this would apply to this. And I'm like, everything's connected. Like, every piece of who you are and where you're going, it's all connected. It's just, we forget. We tend to think that the things that we've learned, the things that we've done, they don't apply to where we are right now. And they 100% do. We just kind of lose it. I think we lose that, especially when we get older. When we get older, we're like, oh, okay, well, let's make things simple. I don't want to do any of that. And I think it's easy to forget how fun it was to be, for me, to be the rebellious 12-year-old. I'm like, I need more of that. I need more of that in my life, in my business. And how do I make that happen in a way that obviously works now and can help other people understand that same concept?
When you get older, you're a little less like to change, and it's
Everything's
unfortunate.
Scary, right?
Yeah.
Like you drive fast and I'm like, oh my God, please slow down. Like,
That's right.
you don't want to do any of those things and I had to push myself. When this started, I'm terrified of heights, horrible. Heights are like not my thing.
Wow.
And I went on a trip with my girlfriend and we had set up, one of those, you go in, it's personal development type, trips in Miraval in Austin, Texas. And we set up all the events and we get there and I decided on the fly, you climb up this 75-foot pole with a harness and then you have to jump off.
Nice.
And it was like, I have to do this. I got up halfway up the pole and I'm like, nope, coming back up. Halfway up, literally, thank God there was only 3 of us in our group because I took forever. But it was up the pole and I'm like, no. And then finally I'm like thinking to myself, the only person I'm hurting here by not finishing this is me. So I have to do it. And after I did it, I was like, oh my God, okay. 1, I'm never doing that again. But 2, like that was like the next thing for me to understand that it's the push. That's like another push I needed to know that I can do it. I can keep pushing and I can do scary things even at my age. Like I don't have to be 12. I can still do these scary things now. And I think that that's another big, lesson for people. Do something scary. It catapults everything else in your life that you're focusing on working on. So that would be a little side note. So if you're terrified of heights, go jump off a pole. It'll help. I promise.
Yeah. You constantly challenge yourself. And, when I started my business in my 20s and I made a lot of mistakes, but, I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have kids. Now you're a little bit older. You have, you're just a little bit more conservative when it comes to financial matters. It's harder to take risks, but you still want, doesn't mean you can't challenge yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely because we've all, especially not new age, like not my son, but like the way that we all grew up, it was you save, you don't do this, you don't have debt, you don't do all these things. And the concept is shifting so much now. And, my son's like, no, well, that, he tries to tell me they don't say that anymore. He's like, have all the debt and do all the things. And I'm like, oh my God, you're making me have, anxiety. And I have to grasp a little bit of that and say, my husband, and say, we got to do something a little scary. That for us, that was like, we bought some Bitcoin at some point. And I'm like, that was terrifying to me. I'm like, why are we doing this? We're buying some invisible stuff. But my son thought it was the coolest thing ever. He's like, oh, great. When you guys are gone, I'll be a millionaire from your Bitcoin. I'm like, okay. So I think it's just a little bit, the concepts are different, but yeah.
They've certainly switched. Your number 1 lesson is your values matter. It's important for people to have core values.
That is something that, again, I think the more we shift in society, the more I see that that's not something that's, just a given. So when I teach the values, I teach them as black sheep values, because when I was a kid, I was the black sheep of the family. So I'm like, what were my black sheep values and how did that relate to who I was? And so I always ask people, like, I want to see what your values are. And I usually give them, 2 different tests. Like, here's your black sheep values as you, as a person. And then I want to look at what your values are in your business, because some of them are intertwined. And sometimes I find people have different core values in both, which is always fun for me to go through the process. But I think people forget how important that everything is based off your values. Everything that you do hinges on your values. Everything that you do in your business, your entire business structure should have its own set of values, and they're not necessarily the same as your personal. And I think that I think people just skip over that stuff because it's the non-sexy, it's boring. It doesn't get me, they don't think it gets them to where they're supposed to go, and it's not going to make me money right now, but it's foundationally, so much of it is skipped these days that they wonder why, it's the sinking your foundation, you have no foundation. I talk about cracked foundation. Most people don't even have a foundation period these days. So bringing people back to the basics, and I always just laugh and just say, if you work with me, a lot of it's not sexy. It's not flashy. You're going to think that it means nothing, but at the end, it all comes together, and it's the understanding of why it's a necessity. And I think it's a reminder, especially I do have some younger clients that are like, why are we doing this? What's the point of this? And I'm like, oh boy, just go for the ride. You'll understand at the back end of it. But yeah, so I think it's just it's a piece that's lacking, and lacking in a lot of businesses in general. And I think lacking in a lot of people that need to be reminded.
Without your core values, every decision you make after that needs to tie back to the core value. How can you make goals? How can you make milestones without knowing what your actual values are?
Well, I think a lot of it is predicated off of the space saying, just have grit, just be motivated, just, get up and do it. And I'm like, you have to understand that there's a reason why the people that are saying that, they have motivation behind those words. It means something for them to get up and go to work, or get up at 4:00 in the morning and, work out and do their personal development before they go to work, because it's a part of their values. They're not expressing it that way. They're just telling you, just show up, just wake up, just get motivated, just, do the work. And I'm like, I understand why the concept is being lost. It's just being expressed in such an easy way. Just, if you motivate yourself to get up, you'll do it. No. Every morning I motivate myself to get up. Do I want to get out of bed at 5:00 in the morning? No, who does? But I have reasons that I do that fall in line with the goals that I have and the values that I have to achieve those goals. And I think that if it's taught that way, mindset would be different, instead of our poor, my son, looking at Instagram and just reading motivational quotes that are random, that he has no idea what any of it means behind it.
What does your ideal, candidate look like? Your customer, or somebody you could work with?
It's funny is that I didn't used to like to say that I have an ideal person, because I'm always like, of course, anti everything. Like if you say I have to have a niche, I'm going to tell you I don't have to have one, because that's who I am as a person. But I would say to you, the longer that you are in it, and the more you understand, like I said before, the more you understand yourself, the better that you understand who you can help and how you can help them. And that's what translated into me understanding that somebody that is a type A, somebody that's, got thick skin, that wants to be motivated by action and not, by words. There's a lot of people that's okay, that, the motivational quotes, the books, the things, they actually work for them. They're motivated just by words. They don't need to, do a lot of things. But for me, the action is huge. It's the only thing that moves the needle. And it's a missing piece in a lot of coaching out there, where we can just say a lot of fluffy things, and that's supposed to make you feel better, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help you get to where you want to go. So I always tell people, like, you have to be willing to listen to me as it comes out, because it might come out harsh. I don't mean it that way. I have the best intentions, and we usually go through the process of that. But when I say to you, and I've said this yesterday to a lady lawyer, like, you have to stop with the ruminating in circles on your decisions, because you're making none. And making no decision is making a decision to stay stuck where you're at. And it was like, eyeballs this big, and it was like, I'm waiting for her to yell at me, because it's fine. And it was just like, oh my God, you're so right. And I'm like, and then you're waiting for somebody else to make decisions for you. I'm like, this is just, so I am a big proponent of just telling you the truth, and it's going to sting, but then we get past that, and you get to the point where you're actually taking steps to get the goals. And that's my only goal for anyone, is to, what is the goal? What do you want? How do we get there? And let's not take the long way, and let's not, my grandfather used to say, pussyfoot around, and let's just do it. Let's get to work. And I think some people don't like that aggressiveness. So I know I have to work with somebody that's willing to accept it. And I've worked with a lot of women who are like, you're almost too much. Like, I would have not worked with you, but I need that push right now. I can't do the, people telling me all these nice things that I want to hear anymore, because I'm still here, still stuck in this spot. So I find that the more I just stay true to who I am, how I speak, how I talk, how I present myself, the better results I can get for people, and the less, the less negative it is on everyone, right? Like I was always worried I was going to hurt someone's feelings, or they weren't going to like how I said it. That actually hasn't been the case. Once I just owned, this is how I talk and show up, the people that needed to hear that showed up to me, which is such an odd concept, because you push back for that for so long. That would be when I talk to people about just showing up and speaking your truth and being willing to do that. The people that, they always say the people that resonate with your message are going to show up, but it's not just the message, it's the energy and how you show up. People know what they need. I know when I need, to work with somebody that's going to be no BS to me. And I know when I need to work with somebody that's going to be a little softer and deal with emotions. Like, be willing to like own where you're at and work with the person you need to work with. It's usually the one you're going to be uncomfortable with. I always tell everybody that. Don't work with the person that you're most comfortable with, because 99% of the time you're not going to have enough, push to get out of where you're at. We need it to be uncomfortable.
You most certainly do. People need to be more uncomfortable. There's no question. Yeah, that's how you grow. What's the difference between a coach and a mentor?
So coaching, and the typical aspect of coaching is listening. I'm going to repeat back to you what you said, and you are going to come up with your own answers. For me, I do a hybrid. That doesn't work, because I'm an action person. I have a million ideas. And when I'm presented with something, I want to listen to all of it. I want to give you my feedback. I want to say, you can do this and do this. I want you to find what option fits for you. But I'm here to help you figure out what that is, because I always hated the coaching aspect of showing up to ask a question to then being asked a question back. And I'm like, no, I just asked you a question. Like, I would like an answer. I would like to walk through the answer, and I would like to, collectively understand how I go from here to here. Asking me questions and then repeating back questions, to me, is not useful in a lot of applications. And I think it's why people, sometimes stay stuck in indecision, because sometimes people need a little bit of a push. Here, you don't have any ideas. I'm going to give you an idea so you can take a step, and then we'll figure out if that works for you or if it doesn't, if you don't know, and then we'll move from there, right? You always can pivot and change, but you can't stay in that spot. And I think that is where the coaching aspect didn't work for me, which is how I had to choose my own. How do I get around that? Like, how do I mentor? How do I, provide strategy and still do all of those things that you need, and still allow you to be heard, but not allow you to sit back and do nothing?
Big difference.
Huge. I could never have a coach again that would do, that's like the biggest pet peeve for me. So I'd be like the most horrible client ever if somebody told me I had to just go to a coach, or a therapist who just repeatedly asks you questions with no help whatsoever. Like, it's so frustrating to me. So
Yeah, I get that sense as well. So, Bridgit, when I started my business in the 90s, I was working way too hard, just like you're very familiar with this, long days, and I wasn't paying attention to myself. And before you know it, I found myself at 340 pounds. And the doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. She had just been born. So I spent the next year and a half losing about 130 pounds. And people ask me, to this day, like there's some quick little secret, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And I just say discipline, right? I got focused, I got discipline, and I did it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Bridgit Norris.
Discipline has always been, so you kind of laugh in the sense of like, discipline as a kid, that was a no. Nobody disciplined me. I did not allow that. So you grow up and you make a lot of mistakes, because, you want to make your own rules and you want to do your own things, and you learn along the way, and then realize that I do not function well off of not having structure. I'm very structured. You've got to know what works for you. I'm not a person who can just go with I have a calendar, I have things in it, my workouts are in it. The things that are important to me are structured. I like doing the same things at the same time. And, it works for me. And I think that for people to you don't have to be as rigid in it as I am. I just figured out that this is what works for me. But if you don't have it, congratulations to you, losing your weight. My husband, before we met, did the same thing. He lost 100 pounds. And
wow.
For him, it was, he had to look at it as a different word, because discipline, he couldn't, some people that doesn't work with, they don't understand the concepts of how to make it work for them. It feels, it feels negative. It feels like something I don't want to do. It's like, and you have to just want something more than what you have right now. You have to want to be healthier, to be around for your kids. You have to want to, not live in that space anymore. You have to want to put down the, his thing was tombstone pizzas. Like you eat them like 2 and 3 a night. Like you have to,
wow.
You have to be willing to not want those things. And if the word discipline doesn't work for you, figure out a word that does, and then figure out how to make that structure in your life. Because once you start doing it, it becomes so normal that when you don't, like when we go on vacation and it's too long, I'm like, I can't, like, we need to go back to normal. We need to go back to like, this is what we do. This is what we eat. And so for me, it's a huge part of everything that I do on the daily basis, except for Sundays. I finally give myself one day of whatever happens today.
Nice.
But that was a long time learned of going through and still being on some medication for having massive burnout and adrenal fatigue and kind of pushing too hard. There is, you go to the extremes and then you realize that your body, you need to respect it and push, it pushed back, unfortunately, in a negative way for me. And you have to learn. And I think that part of it goes right back into exactly what you said. And for me, it's discipline. Like my body pushed back and said, okay, here, you're done. Now I'm going to force you. And now I can figure out how to make that work for me. Like I was forced to not do anything for weeks. And that was like, do you want to be in a space where you're forced to do something for a long period of time that you don't want to do? Or do you want to figure it out and make it work for you in a way that it does? I should, you say that you're like, I should have known better. I know better, like done all the health, coaching and health fitness and all of that stuff. Like, better, but we all just push. And I had to find, then it's being disciplined to stay disciplined to doing nothing. That was even the worst part. How do you stay disciplined to doing nothing? Like literally, I don't allow myself phones. I stay off social media, like literally nothing. And that was like the hardest thing. I'm like, oh my God, I need to do something. Like I can't just sit here, but you need to figure out what that is. And my body needs it. So I have to give it to it. So what do they say? What is the term? Like you either, deal with it now or your health will deal. I can't remember the exact way they put it.
Give it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so we all are going to fall into some sort of category of, I should have known better. And this is what happened. And now I have to fix it. But I think that if we can start with the little things, it doesn't have to be so encompassing, just little things. Pick something little. Like, we started out with, somebody asks, oh, do you make your bed every morning? 1,000%. Make your bed every morning. Just start with that. If you've never read the book by the Admiral, make your bed every morning, read it. It's a short read, but it's very true. You wake up and just, if you do one thing regular every day and it's just make your bed, you win. You start the day with a win and you win. So, and that rolls into, oh, well, now I make my bed every day. It's normal. So now what's the next thing am I going to do every day? And now all of a sudden you're disciplined. It's scary, right? Now we can put that word on you. You can be disciplined in making your bed. You can be disciplined in going to work out, whatever it is. But I think we got to start out small.
You've got so much energy, Bridgit. I would think that not doing anything would be very tough for you.
Very. Oh my goodness. But I know now how it feels when you're doing the opposite and when your body says no more. So I've got to be better at listening to the body, be better at, when you become, when I lived in Florida, everybody's, you're always in shorts and t-shirts and everybody's got to be fit and doing all the right things. And it comes in a obsession. And I allowed that to happen when I tried to train for a bodybuilding competition. Food became an obsession. Everything was counted and obsessive. And it pushed into all of this when realizing that you have to be willing, I have to be disciplined enough to listen to my body. When my body says no, the answer has to be no. And that's like the hardest part. And just in not doing anything, my body's saying no today. Oh my God. Like, I don't want to listen to that. I have a million things I want to do. I want to run around. I want to go here. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's the hardest part. Like for me, it's, you think, I'm not doing enough, right? Like I'm just being weak. I'm not paying, I'm being lazy. And there's a fine line between understanding that. And so that's where discipline gets hard.
Yeah, listening to your body, self-control, because it'll tell you. It'll most certainly tell you. Bridgit Norris, what motivates you?
Oh, wow. You know what? When I quit my coaching business and wasn't sure I was going back, the motivation of actually figuring it out and going back was because and it's so hard to explain to somebody who doesn't have that same feeling, but for people that do, and probably most people that listen to your podcast definitely do, you have this feeling that it doesn't go away. It's like this thing inside you that knows if I'm not doing this thing, or if I'm not, helping people, if I'm not doing this type of work, or if I'm not giving back or whatever it is, you feel empty. You feel kind of a piece of you is not fulfilled. And so for me, I had to listen to that. I had to say like, okay, if I just stop right now, like the world's not going to end. Like, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change in my life other than the fact that I'm not going to be on social media and not have to deal with all the, BS from social media. But I couldn't do that. Like it kept pulling me back. Like, how do I help somebody? How do I show up and help one person today in just words on social media? And that's when I knew that's the thing. That's the pull, and it's not going to go away. I could try to ignore it. I can try to push it down. I can do all of, I've tried all of those things. And the more you deny it, the louder and the more you could feel it. So that's my pull. Like, I don't think I'm going to ever be able to not do this in some form or fashion, whether in, 20 years, it's just, for the sake of doing it for people. It's always going to be there, and I can't ignore that.
So your motivation was to help those who need to be coached.
Yeah, for me, it's the idea of somebody not being able to be true to who they are, not be heard, not be able to show up in a way that they can use their strengths. And I think that the saddest part and I said it to myself, I don't know what I'm good at. Like, I'm not good at anything that is worthy of giving to someone else. And I think that's a sad thing to say to yourself, because it's not true. And I think that's the motivation. Like that to me was the hardest thing. Like, I kept saying to myself, I don't know, I'm not good at anything. I'm not good at anything that's valuable to someone else. And the more I said that to myself, and the more I kept hearing myself say that, I'm like, that's horrible. That's a horrible thing to feel. It's a horrible thing to say. And I don't want anybody else to ever feel that, because everybody has something to give to someone. And that's a real motivating factor. When I hear something of that version come out of someone, it just draws me to them. Like, I need to help you get out of this space, because it's so untrue. And I think the more you feel that and the more you think that, I think that can contribute to the unhealthiness in your body, in yourself. And for me, that's a huge driving factor.
And how do you measure success?
Well, I used to say that, like everyone else, it's the dollars. It's what does what does your bank account say? And I also, came from nothing. I grew up in a very poor in a trailer park and, before I moved out, and then bounced around from families and never had a lot. So when people hear me say like, it's not about the money, I also implore everybody to, if there's things that you want and that money's going to create, go create it, have it, feel it. Because once you do, you can move past the idea that that's what it's about. And I think for some people, they need that feeling. I needed to, buy Louis Vuitton purses to feel like I had those things. And then you get to the point where you realize that those aren't the things that make you feel successful. The power of success is knowing that other people's lives are changing. The power is knowing that I am comfortable in who I am and showing up in who I am and with what I have and what I want to do. And nothing, success every year could change. I could, this year, success is coaching where I'm coaching. And next year, I want to write a book, and maybe that's what success looks like next year. I'm willing to ride the season of what my success looks like. And I just know that now it's not tied to dollars anymore, because that doesn't dictate anything. I know lots of people who, help a lot of people that make nowhere near as much money as, some of these people online, and their lives are much better for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Well, Bridgit, I was very excited when you accepted this, and thanks so much for your time. I think with your community, you're helping people like that. It's I don't know, dare I say it, Bridgit? It's born what you're doing what you were born to do here. I mean, you could tell you love doing it. You're helping these people, and you need to be applauded for it. How can we get in touch with you?
Super easy, both on Instagram and Facebook. It's just Bridgit Norris. So it's BRIDGIT. And I'm more active on Facebook than I am on Instagram. My son says it's because old people go on Facebook. But I'm working on it. I'm working on kind of trying to do all the things, but it's super easy. You can find me either of those places. And my inbox is always open. I am an, open book, open questions. I don't turn anyone away. So feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And, if I'm in your neck of the woods, perhaps your husband and I get a cup of coffee, but no Tombstone pizza. That's for sure.
100% no. I appreciate this. It was super fun. You too.
Have a great day. Bye now.
You too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources, and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.